By the time the boat reached the jetty, there was nothing more anyone could do. On that clear Saturday morning off Rottnest Island, a routine spearfishing trip had already turned into a nightmare that would shatter a young family forever. It was mid-May, just before 10 a.m., when the calm turquoise waters northwest of Perth became the scene of a horrific shark attack. Out at Horseshoe Reef, around 1 kilometer from Rottnest Island, a group of friends were in the water doing what they loved, spearfishing in a place they knew well and trusted. Among them was 38-year-old Steven Mattaboni, a keen spearfisher, conservation-minded ocean lover, and devoted father of two from Perth's northern suburbs. Steven wasn't some reckless thrill-seeker chasing danger for the sake of it. Friends described him as charismatic, loyal, funny, and deeply respectful of the ocean, a man who lived and breathed the sea and cared about conserving it for future generations. To his closest mate, who had known him since childhood, Steven had two great loves in his life, the ocean and his girls. At home, those girls were still too young to understand what the ocean was about to take from them. Steven and his wife Shireen had two daughters, one just 4 months old, the other about to turn 3. In a statement after his death, Shireen described him as an incredible, devoted father to their two beautiful daughters, and said their hearts were irrevocably broken by his loss. She called him fiercely loyal and endlessly generous, the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back. Friends and teammates at the Kingsley Amateur Football Club remembered him as one of the most genuine people you could meet, a presence that could light up a room and a much-loved friend to many. To them, he wasn't just another name in a headline. He was Mattas, the guy whose smile you noticed before you even heard his voice. That morning, Steven set out from Rottnest Island with friends for what should have been another ordinary dive. Their destination was Horseshoe Reef, roughly 1 kilometer offshore to the northwest, a coral reef known to spearfishers and considered part of the island's draw for adventurous visitors. Conditions were good enough for them to be in the water, moving between reef and boat, scanning the depths for fish. Steven was on the surface of the water, about 20 meters from the dive boat, when everything changed. According to police, a 4-meter great white shark surged up and bit him on the legs, in what authorities later described as a horrific attack. There were no warnings, no time to prepare, just one violent moment in which a top predator did exactly what evolution had shaped it to do. His friends saw it happen. In an instant, the calm of the reef was replaced by panic, shouting, and a desperate sprint through the water as they tried to reach him. They hauled him back to the boat and immediately began the race to shore, about 1 kilometer across the open water toward Geordie Bay on the northern side of Rottnest Island. On board, they did everything they could. Authorities later praised the efforts of Steven's friends, recognizing how quickly they reacted and how hard they fought to save him in those critical minutes. But out there, far from land, with catastrophic leg injuries inflicted by a 4-meter great white, the odds were brutally stacked against them. Emergency services were alerted as the boat raced toward the island. By around 10 a.m., paramedics from St. John WA Ambulance were waiting at Geordie Bay Jetty when Steven was brought ashore. They performed CPR and tried to resuscitate him on the island, but despite everything, he could not be revived. In just a few minutes, a young father's life had gone from a normal weekend dive to a tragedy that no amount of skill, experience, or love for the ocean could undo. Steven Mattaboni was 38 years old when he died from his injuries at Rottnest Island. What began as a familiar spearfishing trip ended as a moment that would echo through his family's life for decades.
Good evening. A man has died mauled by a shark at a holiday hotspot. He was diving when the 4-meter great white moved in. His mates desperately tried to warn him as the predator approached.
Around the time of the attack, Surf Life Saving WA reported a 5-meter white shark sighted roughly 80 meters offshore in the area, underscoring the presence of large predators close to where people swim and dive. The shark that attacked Steven was reported to be around 4 meters long, roughly 13 feet of pure power, built for hunting in exactly these kinds of waters. Rottnest Island itself is only about 18 to 19 kilometers off the western Australian coast, a popular holiday destination where turquoise water and white sand can make danger feel very far away, until it isn't. This attack became part of a grim pattern that had already unsettled Australia that year, one of several fatal shark incidents that reminded the country how quickly the sea can turn. The Associated Press noted it was the nation's first shark fatality since January, when a 12-year-old boy died days after being mauled by a bull shark in Sydney Harbour. For Western Australia, it was another entry in a long, uneasy history of rare but devastating shark attacks along an otherwise stunning coastline. In the days after Steven's death, tributes poured in from family, friends, and the wider community. His wife, Shireen, described him as an incredible father, whose dedication to their daughters was absolute, saying their hearts were irrevocably shattered by losing him so young. She said the world had lost a truly one-of-a-kind gentleman, and that their daughters had lost an amazing father far too soon. The Kingsley Amateur Football Club, where he played, shared memories of Mattas as someone whose smile and presence could light up a room, a teammate and friend people gravitated toward. Friends spoke of a man who would do anything for the people he cared about, whose life was anchored by two things, the ocean and his family. Almost everyone who knew him came back to the same idea, that he lived for the water and for his girls. Those girls will grow up with photographs, stories, and secondhand memories of a father they barely got the chance to know. One will remember fragments, a laugh, a hug, a glimpse of wetsuits by the door before a dive. The other will have to rely entirely on the words of others to understand who her father was, and how fiercely he loved her before she was old enough to remember him herself. Rottnest Island will continue to attract tourists, families, and divers drawn by its clear water and sense of escape from the mainland. Boats will keep heading out toward Horseshoe Reef, and most of them will return without incident, their passengers carrying nothing more than sunburn and stories of a good day on the water. But for the people who were on that boat with Steven, and for those who loved him, that reef will never look the same again. Shark attacks in Australia remain statistically rare, especially compared to the number of people who enter the ocean every year. Yet statistics mean very little to a family who has just lost a husband, a father, a lifelong friend. For them, the danger is no longer an abstract risk. It is a permanent absence, an empty chair at the table that will never be filled again. The ocean does not think in terms of fairness or tragedy. It does not care how experienced you are, how much you respect it, or how many people are waiting for you at home. It simply is beautiful, powerful, indifferent. And sometimes that indifference collides with a single human life in the worst possible way. On that Saturday morning at Horseshoe Reef, it collided with Steven Mattaboni. A devoted father of two, a husband, a friend, a man who loved the ocean and believed he understood its moods, was taken in moments. And the ripples of that moment are still spreading through everyone who knew him, everyone who heard his story, and everyone who now hesitates for just a second before stepping into deep water. In the end, the horror of this story is not just the bite of a great white shark or the violence of a sudden attack. It is the silence that follows.